Racist waitress spills scalding coffee on Barron Trump's face, but Melania Trump arrives to deliver justice. The elegant chime of porcelain cups echoed through the upscale cafe, where high-profile patrons gathered for a serene afternoon break. Barron Trump sat quietly at a corner table, scrolling through his phone while waiting for his order. Dressed in a sharp navy blazer, he blended in with the sophisticated clientele, drawing little attention to himself. As he waited, a waitress with cold, calculating eyes noticed him from across the room. Her lips curled into a subtle sneer. Another privileged kid who thinks the world owes him everything, she thought bitterly. The waitress had always harbored resentment toward the wealthy, and today, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Balancing a tray with a steaming cup of coffee, she approached Barron's table. Her steps slowed as she got closer, her eyes narrowing with malicious intent. Just as she reached his side, she deliberately tilted the cup, pouring the scalding liquid directly onto Barron's face and chest. A gasp rippled through the cafe as the young man recoiled in shock, clutching his burning skin. His chair scraped against the floor as he instinctively pushed back, his face contorted in pain. Barron barely managed to contain his cry of pain, his vision blurring as the searing heat burned into his skin. The cafe fell silent for a split second, the patrons stunned by what had just unfolded. Whispers and gasps filled the air. The waitress, feigning concern, dropped the empty cup onto the floor. "Oh no! I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, though her insincere tone betrayed her true feelings. It was an accident. But her poorly disguised smirk didn't escape the notice of those watching closely. A few customers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that something far more sinister was at play. Barron wiped his face with trembling hands, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His pale complexion was now red and blotched from the burns. Before he could even respond, the cafe's entrance swung open, and in walked Melania Trump, her presence commanding the room's full attention. Dressed in a sleek beige dress and black heels, Melania's eyes immediately locked on her son. In an instant, her composed demeanor transformed into one of icy fury. She strode toward him, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. "Barron," she called, her voice trembling with concern as she reached his side. She gently cupped his face, inspecting the damage. "Are you all right?" He nodded weakly. "It's just the coffee. I think it was an accident." Melania's sharp gaze shifted to the waitress. "Accident?" she repeated, her tone dangerously calm. "It certainly doesn't seem like one." The waitress took a step back, her confidence faltering under Melania's unyielding stare. I didn't mean to. It slipped, I swear." Melania didn't flinch. "Then why were you smiling after it happened?" The crowd murmured, growing bolder now that Melania had voiced what they'd all been thinking. The waitress's face flushed, her eyes darting around for an escape. "You think you can hurt my son and walk away without consequences?" Melania said, her voice rising just enough to silence the whispers. "Do you know who you've just assaulted?" I didn't know," the waitress stammered, her bravado crumbling. Melania leaned in, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that carried through the room. "You should have known better. But since you didn't, let me teach you something about accountability." The manager of the cafe rushed over, his face pale with panic. "Mrs. Trump, I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable. She will be dealt with immediately." Melania turned to the manager. "Yes, she will. I expect her to be removed from her position at once. No one should suffer this kind of behavior, especially from someone entrusted to serve others." The manager nodded frantically. "Absolutely. She's fired, effective immediately." The waitress's mouth fell open in shock. "Fired? You can't do this to me. It was just a mistake." "You didn't make a mistake," Melania said coldly. "You made a choice, a cruel, deliberate choice. Now you'll live with the consequences." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the waitress stood frozen, her once arrogant demeanor dissolving into desperation. "Please. I didn't mean it. I have bills to pay," she pleaded, her voice trembling now. Melania's face remained unreadable, her steely resolve unshaken. "You should have thought of that before choosing cruelty over kindness," she said, her words cutting through the air like a knife. The manager gestured for the waitress to leave, but before she could make a move, another voice emerged from the crowd, a woman with a young child clinging to her hand. "I saw everything," the woman said, stepping forward. That waitress smirked when she threw the coffee. It was no accident. The murmurs in the cafe grew louder, and others began to speak up. "She's right. I saw it too." She didn't even try to apologize properly. The waitress's eyes darted around in panic, realizing there was no way out. She glanced back at Melania, hoping for mercy. "Please, give me another chance." Melania raised an eyebrow. "Another chance? Did you offer my son a second chance when you decided to humiliate and hurt him?" She crossed her arms. "I believe in second chances, but only for those who show genuine remorse and a desire to change. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught." The manager cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding in front of so many witnesses. "Mrs. Trump, again, I assure you, this situation will be handled immediately. Our establishment does not tolerate this kind of behavior." "See that it's done," Melania said with finality. She turned her attention back to Barron, her expression softening. "Let's get you cleaned up, darling." As she gently wiped the remaining coffee from his face with a napkin, the crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous applause. People stood up from their seats, some filming the scene with their phones. Melania gave a small nod to the onlookers, then helped Barron to his feet. "Thank you for your support," she told the crowd. "We should always stand up against injustice, no matter how big or small." Moments later, outside the cafe, Barron and Melania stepped into the crisp afternoon air, leaving the chaotic scene behind. Barron was still shaken but grateful for his mother's swift intervention. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly, his voice tinged with emotion. "I didn't know what to do back there." Melania smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You did the right thing by staying calm. Never let anyone make you feel small. You are stronger than you realize." Barron nodded, feeling a newfound sense of confidence rise within him. "I won't forget that." As they walked down the street, people stopped to greet them, offering words of encouragement and admiration. The story of what had just happened inside the cafe was already spreading like wildfire, with headlines appearing on social media within minutes. Melania Trump confronts racist waitress. Justice served. Barron Trump's composure impresses crowds after cafe incident. Melania glanced at her phone, noticing the flood of supportive messages. She smiled but quickly turned her focus back to her son. "Let's get you some proper first aid, and then maybe we can end the day on a happier note." Barron grinned. "I could go for some ice cream." "Consider it done," Melania replied, placing a protective arm around his shoulder as they disappeared into the bustling city. Barron and Melania stepped into the nearby pharmacy to clean his wound properly. Though Barron's face stung from the hot coffee, the deeper pain was emotional. He couldn't shake the humiliation and the piercing stares that had followed him after the incident. While Melania dabbed an antiseptic on his cheek, she noticed the distant look in his eyes. "Talk to me, Barron," she said gently. "How are you feeling?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "It wasn't just the coffee. It's how she looked at me, like I didn't deserve to be there, like I was less than everyone else." His voice faltered. "Why do people act like that, Mom?" Melania took a deep breath, her hand resting on his shoulder. "There will always be people who judge others unfairly, who act out of cruelty or ignorance. But what matters is how you respond to them. You have a choice, to let their actions define you or to rise above them." Barron nodded slowly, her words beginning to sink in. "I don't want to let it bother me anymore. I want to be stronger." "You already are," Melania said, offering him a proud smile. "And every experience, even the painful ones, teaches us something important." Back at the inside the cafe, the atmosphere remained tense. The manager gathered his staff for an impromptu meeting, determined to address the situation before it spiraled further out of control. Several customers had stayed behind, discussing the incident in hushed tones. The waitress sat in a corner, her eyes downcast. She could feel the judgmental stares from her colleagues and customers alike. Regret filled her, but it wasn't just regret for her actions. It was regret for the consequences she now faced. The manager cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. "Let me make one thing clear," he said firmly. "This establishment will not tolerate discrimination or cruelty of any kind. What happened today was unacceptable, and we will be taking immediate steps to ensure it never happens again." He turned to the waitress, his voice colder now. "You're suspended effective immediately. Take this time to reflect on your actions. Whether or not you return depends on your ability to change." Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded silently and walked out, the weight of her choices pressing down on her shoulders. Melania's reflection. Later that evening, Melania sat in her living room, sipping tea while scrolling through the endless news coverage of the incident. She had always known the world watched her family closely, but today had reminded her how quickly things could escalate. She glanced at Barron, who sat on the couch engrossed in a book. He looked peaceful now, but she could still sense the lingering thoughts swirling in his mind. She admired his resilience, how he had endured the ordeal with dignity and grace. Her phone buzzed with a message from a close friend. "Saw the news. You handled it perfectly. You're raising a remarkable young man." Melania smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. She thought about the countless parents who had likely seen the news, using it as a teachable moment for their children. Perhaps something good could come from this after all, a reminder to treat others with kindness and respect, no matter their background or status. The aftermath. The next morning, headlines continued to dominate the news cycle. Reporters gathered outside the cafe, eager for interviews with anyone who had witnessed the incident. Social media buzzed with opinions, with hashtags like #JusticeForBarron and #StandUpToBullying trending worldwide. Surprisingly, the waitress herself released a heartfelt public apology, taking full responsibility for her actions. "I acted out of ignorance and prejudice, and I deeply regret the pain I caused. This experience has been a wake-up call for me, and I am committed to learning and becoming a better person." The apology went viral, sparking a wider conversation about forgiveness and redemption. Some people called for her to be given a second chance, while others remained skeptical. Barron's empowering moment. Days later, Barron stood in front of his classmates during a special assembly at his school. The principal had asked him to share his experience, hoping it would inspire others. Barron took a deep breath, his heart pounding as he began to speak. "What happened to me was tough, but it taught me something important. No matter how people treat you, you have the power to stay kind, to stay strong, and to stand up for yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel small." The room erupted into applause, and Barron felt a sense of pride he hadn't expected. His words had made an impact, not just on him but on everyone around him. After his heartfelt speech at school, Barron returned home to an outpouring of messages and support from friends, teachers, and even strangers around the world. His inbox was flooded with encouraging words. "You're so brave. Thank you for speaking up. We need more people like you." Though the messages were overwhelming, Barron couldn't help but feel inspired by the positive response. His experience at the cafe was no longer just a personal struggle. It had become a symbol of strength and standing up against injustice. He felt a growing sense of responsibility to do something bigger, something that could help others who had gone through similar experiences. A new mission. A few days later, during dinner, Barron brought up an idea. "Mom, I've been thinking, what if we start a campaign to promote kindness and respect in schools? We could help kids who feel like they don't belong." Melania set down her fork, her eyes lighting up with pride. "That's a wonderful idea, Barron. Kindness and respect are more powerful than we realize. If you want to do this, I'll support you every step of the way." Barron nodded excitedly. "We could call it Stand Strong Together. It'll be about encouraging people to stand up for themselves and each other." Melania smiled warmly. "Let's make it happen." Building the campaign. Within weeks, Stand Strong Together was officially launched. It started small, just a website and a few social media pages, but quickly gained traction. Barron shared his personal story on the site, explaining how his experience had motivated him to create a movement focused on empathy and standing up against prejudice. Students from all over the country began sharing their own stories. Some had been bullied for how they looked, others for where they came from or what they believed. Each story carried the same underlying message: the importance of standing strong in the face of adversity. As the movement grew, Barron was invited to speak at various schools, community centers, and even national conferences. His voice, once hesitant and uncertain, grew stronger with each speech. He learned to channel his pain into a powerful message of hope and unity. The cafe manager's response. Meanwhile, the cafe manager watched the rise of Stand Strong Together with a mixture of awe and regret. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed to protect Barron during the incident. Determined to make amends, he reached out to Melania with a proposal. "I want to offer a formal apology," he said over the phone. "But more than that, I want to be part of the solution. Our cafe would like to partner with your campaign. We could organize community events focused on kindness and inclusion." Melania paused for a moment before replying. "That's a generous offer. Barron and I believe in second chances, and we would be happy to collaborate." The community event. The first Stand Strong Together community event was held at the cafe. Families, students, and local leaders gathered to hear stories of resilience and transformation. There were booths set up with activities promoting kindness, workshops on how to handle bullying, and a stage for speakers to share their experiences. Barron stood at the center of it all, humbled by how much the movement had grown. As he looked around, he spotted familiar faces: teachers, classmates, and even the waitress who had spilled the coffee. She approached him nervously, holding a cup of coffee in her hands. "Hi, Barron. I just wanted to say, I'm truly sorry for what happened. I've learned so much since that day, thanks to you." Barron smiled, accepting the coffee. "It takes courage to apologize." "I appreciate that." They shook hands, and in that moment, the past no longer felt like a burden but a stepping stone towards something greater. National recognition. News of Stand Strong Together spread like wildfire. Media outlets covered the campaign, praising Barron's efforts to turn a negative experience into a powerful movement for change. Invitations to larger events started pouring in, including a televised interview on a major network. During the interview, the host asked, "Barron, what message do you hope people take away from your campaign?" Barron leaned forward, his voice steady. "I want people to know that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength. We're all stronger when we stand together, support each other, and treat everyone with respect." The audience erupted into applause, and the segment went viral within hours. The movement's legacy. Over the next year, Stand Strong Together continued to grow. Schools across the country adopted the campaign's principles, incorporating them into their curriculums. Communities organized kindness drives, encouraging people to perform random acts of kindness for strangers. Barron became a symbol of resilience for many. His face appeared on magazine covers, and his speeches were quoted in classrooms and boardrooms alike. But through it all, he remained grounded, always remembering the day at the cafe that had started it all. One evening, as he sat on the porch with Melania, watching the sunset, he reflected on how far they had come. "It's funny, isn't it?" he said. "How something so painful turned into something so beautiful." Melania nodded, her eyes glistening. That's the power of turning pain into purpose. The Stand Strong Together campaign was only the beginning. What started as a local initiative quickly turned into a nationwide movement. Barron, now a well-recognized figure in youth activism, found himself speaking at major events, where his message resonated with people from all walks of life. But with growth came new challenges. The media spotlight was relentless, and not everyone welcomed the movement with open arms. Barron received both praise and criticism. Some questioned his motives, while others doubted the lasting impact of Stand Strong Together. Still, Barron refused to let negativity deter him. An unexpected invitation. One afternoon, as Barron sat at his desk reviewing plans for the next community event, Melania walked in holding an envelope. "This just arrived for you," she said with a smile, placing it on his desk. Barron opened it, his eyes widening as he read the contents. It was an invitation to speak at the United Nations Youth Conference, an event attended by young leaders from around the world. The theme, Building a Kinder Future. "Mom, this is incredible," Barron exclaimed. "They want me to talk about the campaign and how we can inspire global change." Melania placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've worked hard for this, Barron. You've earned it." The United Nations speech. The day of the conference arrived, and Barron stood backstage, taking deep breaths to calm his nerves. The conference hall was filled with delegates, world leaders, and young activists eager to share their visions for a better world. When his name was announced, Barron walked onto the stage, the applause thundering in his ears. He adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good afternoon. My name is Barron Trump, and I'm here today because I believe in the power of kindness and unity. It's easy to feel small in a world that sometimes feels divided and harsh. I know because I've felt it too. But I've learned that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that grow into waves of change." He paused, scanning the audience. Stand Strong Together started as a simple idea, a way to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. But it became something much bigger because people believed in it. They believed in each other. And if we can create that kind of change in one community, imagine what we can do on a global scale. The hall fell silent as Barron concluded his speech. Kindness is our greatest strength. It's not just an action, it's a mindset. And it's up to us to make sure that future generations grow up in a world that values compassion over division, unity over hate. As Barron stepped off the stage, the applause was deafening. Delegates rushed to congratulate him, and his message quickly became the centerpiece of the conference. Global partnerships. Following the conference, Stand Strong Together gained international attention. NGOs, corporations, and governments reached out, wanting to partner with the movement. Schools in other countries began adopting the program, translating its materials into multiple languages to spread the message of kindness and resilience. Barron traveled to different parts of the world, meeting young people who had been inspired by his story. In one school in Africa, a student told him, "Your campaign gave me the courage to speak up for myself. Before that, I felt invisible." In Europe, a group of teachers invited Barron to speak at a seminar on mental health and emotional resilience in schools. His insights were met with enthusiasm, and plans were made to integrate Stand Strong Together into national education policies. The personal challenge. Despite the campaign's growing success, Barron couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. There were moments when he questioned if he was doing enough or if the movement would truly have a lasting impact. One night, as he sat on the couch with Melania, he voiced his concerns. "Mom, what if it's not enough? What if everything we've built just fades away one day?" Melania listened carefully before responding. "Barron, every movement starts with a spark. You've already created that spark. The important thing is to inspire others to keep it burning. You can't carry it alone, but you've built something that will continue to grow because it's touched so many lives." Barron nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right. It's not just about me. It's about all of us standing strong together, the celebration of change." To mark the one-year anniversary of Stand Strong Together, Barron organized a massive celebration in New York City. The event featured speakers from around the world, sharing stories of how the movement had changed their lives. There were performances, interactive workshops, and a live-streamed panel discussion on the future of youth activism. As the event drew to a close, Barron took the stage once again. 1 year ago, this movement was just an idea. Today, it's a reality because of all of you. Together, we've shown that kindness can change the world. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked out at the crowd. This is only the beginning. The legacy continues. Years later, Stand Strong Together became a permanent part of school curriculums in multiple countries. Its principles were taught in classrooms, and its message of unity and resilience became a guiding force for a new generation. Barron, now a young adult, continued to lead the movement, mentoring the next wave of youth leaders. His story became the subject of documentaries, inspiring countless others to stand up for what they believed in. But for Barron, the greatest reward wasn't the recognition or the accolades. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference, that he had taken a painful experience and turned it into a powerful force for good. As he stood on the balcony of his New York apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, Barron smiled to himself. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth every step. Because in the end, Kindness truly was the greatest strength.